I have worn my duck belt just for this occasion. See? See all the ducks? There is never a time when a duck belt isn't appropriate, but it has never been more appropriate. The common eider is the largest duck in the northern hemisphere, and it is highly adapted to marine environments, more than any other sea duck. It has a circumpolar distribution, living in Arctic and subarctic coastal marine habitats. It nests in large colonies on marine islands, and it also stays in large groups in inshore coastal regions during the non-breeding season. Many of them remain in the north throughout the winter, especially around Polynesias and sheltered island areas. These guys are diurnal feeders and will dive up to 20 meters to get food, which for them is mainly mollusks and crustaceans. These guys have strong site fidelity when it comes to nesting, and females will often return to the same nesting site year after year. They are definitely seasonally monogamous, but some populations do form long-term pair bonds. We basically guess that they have winter site fidelity as well, but that's not been well studied. Although generally they are very well studied due to their abundance, it is just generally the most researched sea duck. As I said, they're a pretty big duck, on average being about 50 to 70 centimeters long and 13 to 2,600 grams. Pretty big duck. They are heavy-bodied with a short, thick neck and a long wedge-shaped bill and head profile. That's the thing you'll notice about eiders. Their head is a triangle. I think it makes them cute. You should too. As always, the males are the ones with the fancy breeding plumage that we know them by. They've got this striking black and white plumage, a black crown which is sometimes divided by a white streak, a white head and neck with pale green patches on the nape and ear coverts, white upper parts, a black rump and tail, and black underparts, and a rosy pink tinge on their breast. Their bill is an olive gray with a pale yellow at the base and tip, with lobes that are extended towards their eyes. Again, that's that triangle face that they got. And females, of course, look very dull by comparison. It's really unfair of the birds to always do this. Can't the females be the pretty ones for once? No. Never. The females are a warm brown with black barring, pale eye ring, and a faint eye stripe. You can see while in flight they have two narrow white wing bars and a purplish-brown speculum, and their bill is also an olive gray color. The males do also have a non-breeding plumage, which, side note, a lot of birds have this, but for some reason, I'm not quite sure why, in ducks it is typically called eclipse plumage. It seems to be called this because the duller feathers eclipse his brighter feathers, making him less attractive both to females but also to predators within the non-breeding season, making him overall safer. For a little bit, they can't fly, and so they want to be as inconspicuous as possible, because they can't escape as well, if things want to eat them. I think eclipse is a much better name for this than non-breeding plumage. It's much more romantic, but for some reason, we only seem to say it when we're talking about ducks. I'm honestly, selfishly a little bit okay with that. Ducks deserve all the love they can get. They're the best. Quote me on it. It's pretty easy to get these guys confused with all the other eiders, particularly the females. The females all look the same with that triangle head, although the male plumages are pretty easy to tell apart if you get a good look at them. And that sloping head shape is really the thing that identifies all eiders. They've all got it, and it's easy to pick out. Well, they all have it, and they don't all have it. The 3 extant species in the genus Somateria do have it. They've all got that slope, with the male king eiders having a little extra flounce to it. But the Steller's eider has a much more classic duck-shaped head. Things you say in the bird world. But the Steller's eider is actually in the genus Polysticta, so they are not a true eider, even though we call them that. So why would we call things the right thing? So the hatchlings of these guys are fully downy when they hatch, are black to dark gray above and lighter gray below, and the sexes look alike, with the females being slightly smaller. I should get just a sticker of that. For their juvenile plumages, males have a sepia to blackish brown feathers with buff streaks and tawny edges, and early signs of barring appears. And females are similar to males, but with less distinct barring and lighter wing covert edges. As I said, it takes them several years to get to full adult plumage, and before they get there, they've got a couple of turnover plumages. I don't exactly know what to call it. They've got a basic 1 plumage, an alternate 1 plumage, and then a basic 2 and 3, all sort of gradually getting towards their full adult plumage. They do undergo a complete molt to their basic plumages, leaving them flightless at the end of the summer. Now, the plumage that a given bird is currently wearing is highly variable, determined by age, sex, subspecies, and the time of year. These guys do have several subspecies, with one subspecies, the Pacific bearing population, possibly warranting a full species status. But there's always debate over that. They look kind of different. They've got a very orange bill and a black V under their chin, at least the drakes do. And there's a fair bit of genetic variation between these guys and the rest of the common eiders. And there have been DNA studies showing that there is mixing among at least some of the subspecies. And though it is rare, there has been some hybridization between them and other species, including with the king eider, mallards, northern pintails, and white-winged scoters. Scoters. They're scoters, not scooters. And their fossils have been found in a lot of places because they've been around for a little while. As I said, they are a circumpolar sea duck, and they have a distribution across the northern hemisphere. And they'll basically winter as far north as open water will allow, often near the edges of ice. They stop when they can't swim anymore. They are a bird that prefers the sea, hanging out mostly on coastal islands, rocky shorelines, estuaries, and shallow seas. Although you can occasionally find them a little bit inland on lakes or rivers, but typically within about 5 to 6 kilometers of the shore. Particularly in winter, they don't like rough seas. They'll avoid places with strong winds or large waves. You'll often find them in bays, river mouths, and kelp beds with sandy or rocky substrate, which is where I found them. There's a lot of kelp. They are generally found at low elevations, because the sea. They are a colonial nester, so you get them all together, all their nests in the same place, often on a coastal island. Although mainland nesting is more common on places where there is low predation on the mainland. Iceland, Spitsbergen, and the Faroe Islands, for example. And to hop back to the subspecies, possibly its own species, real quick, the Pacific common eider is less colonial and more likely to nest singularly. Another factor in them maybe being their own species, but still not yet though. The environment for the nest sites varies kind of wildly, ranging from mossy, rocky areas to shrubby areas to even forested areas. Brood rearing typically occurs in sheltered coves with seaweed beds where the young can just pick out the little crustaceans that are there, and other soft-bodied prey. When they get to their wintering habitat, though, they ditch the sheltered bays and prefer to go for shallow coastal waters, often over offshore shoals, say that 10 times fast, or archipelagos. They prefer areas where ocean swells will hit the rocky coastline, and their feeding time is often concentrated on ebb and low tide in tidal zones. They sort of migrate. They are a short, medium-distance migrator. They are actually sedentary in some populations, but in others, they will migrate in response to ice covers. And they migrate along the coast. They do not like flying overland, although they will sometimes do it if they really need to get to open water quick. For the record, some of the subspecies do seem to have a longer distance migration, but typically they're not a big migrator. As I said, they have a strong site fidelity, particularly among the females, with up to 98% returning to their natal area to breed. And males will disperse a little bit more, but once they've paired with a female, they'll follow her to her preferred nesting site. She gets to choose. And literal nest site reusal is pretty common, particularly if old nesting material is still there. You do pretty often see large staging flocks just south of ice edges, and staging flocks are basically a flock that gets together and stays in one place for a little bit to eat a lot, to build up their fat so that they can survive their migration and their winter. Males, immatures, and non-breeders leave breeding areas a little bit earlier than the females in about June to July to molt, where breeding females don't typically leave until about August. And the molting sites for these guys are usually offshore or on remote islands. They want to be away from stuff when they're vulnerable. When they migrate, they usually migrate in compact, swift, low-flying flocks of just a couple birds to thousands. Where are all these flocking birds? I've never seen thousands of birds flock. Gotta move to the mountains. Oh, at least by a lake. Or by the ocean, where there's ducks. Very important. Their flight speed is about 60 to 70 kilometers per hour, and they're typically about 12 meters above the ground. By the way, I know I'm American, and I'm sorry to all my Americans. Scientific papers are written in the metric system. I'm so sorry. It's how it is. They typically like to eat benthic invertebrates that you'd run away from, particularly mollusks, crustaceans, gastropods, and echinoderms. For the record, echinoderm is one of the scientific names that I really like because it means spiky skin, which is an actual description of the things that are echinoderms. Why can't we do that always? And when females are getting ready to lay, they will feed heavily to build up energy reserves and will often double males' feeding rates. And incubating females rarely feed and will lose up to 45% of their body mass during incubation. Ducklings are more likely to prefer softer prey, amphipods, and insects, while molting birds like high-energy prey like crabs and urchins. They typically feed in shallow marine waters because the stuff they want to eat is in the water and at the bottom. They are diving ducks, so they dive to pick up food from the bottom of the lake, or ocean, or wherever they are. and they use partially opened wings and their webbed feet to maneuver in the water. Their feeding actually occurs in synchronized flocks, with the front line diving and the back line moving forward in the waves. And dabbling has also been observed, typically in shallows, especially near colonies in the spring. Now, while they sometimes dabble, they are not dabbling ducks. And I want to take a second to explain this. I'm sorry. I do this so often. Sorry. There are 6 groupings of ducks you'll typically hear talked about, and relating their scientific names to their common ones is going to take a sec, so bear with me. And let me preface this with there has been a lot of debate about these classifications, and there still is. Don't be mad at me. I've previously talked about waterfowl being the family Anatidae, and in that family, there are a bunch of subfamilies, because of course there are. Get rid of Uncerinae, they are the true geese and swans, not ducks. Get rid of Stictonetinae, they are the freckled ducks, they're in Australia, they're on their own. And so we are left with 2 subfamilies to talk about. But I'm sorry to say that the subfamily Anatinae has 3.5 tribes for us to worry about. The subfamily Dendrocygnae are the whistling ducks, named such because they whistle. The Merginae are the sea ducks. They typically hang out in the sea. Oxyrinae, the stiff-tailed ducks. I think you get the naming pattern at this point. Eithinae, the diving ducks. And the half-tribe Anatinae, which is no longer considered a tribe. But when it was, they were considered the dabbling ducks. Although what we would now colloquially call dabbling ducks are all in the genus Anis, which is still under Anatidae, so they're still ducks. I promise. Didn't lose duck status. So we've got whistling ducks, sea ducks, diving ducks, dabbling ducks, stiff-tailed ducks. Whistling ducks, sea ducks, stiff-tailed ducks, diving ducks, dabbling ducks. Also, you sometimes hear people call things perching ducks. That's the last of the 6 things you'll hear people group ducks into, which is not actually a taxa with a common name, although it was once considered to be a tribe under Anatidae. Now, does anybody care about this besides me and ornithologists? Possibly not, but I really do like knowing which duck is which. Now, keep in mind, these names are often given to groups of ducks that share a specific trait, but when a new species is found that's in that subfamily, genus, tribe, whatever, that doesn't have said trait, the name usually still sticks. So don't be surprised if you come across a diving duck that refuses to dive. Also, there are not things that are ducks that are outside of Anatidae. All the ducks are under Anatidae. If you're somewhere else, you're not a duck. But there are ducks that are not in any of the subfamilies I've listed, but just go straight to a genus. So basically, I've either just said a lot or nothing. Hope this helps. Now, back to the Eiders, which are sea ducks. And unlike some sea ducks, you don't find them on the Great Lakes. Yes, I know the Great Lakes aren't seas, but tell that to the buffleheads, okay? So you're only going to find it if you go to the coast, which I did. These guys can drink salt water. You can't. Please don't do that. With the salt from it being expelled via a salt gland near their eye. Once again, you can't do that, so don't drink salt water. They've got nothing particularly interesting in the vocal department, which is my favorite. Part of the reason I like ducks, they don't do a ton of vocalizations, they just quack. With your normal distress, location, contentment calls, you know. Yeah. As with many ducks, you typically find them in the water, although they can fly and walk. Their legs are centrally placed, so they actually walk pretty well, but they rarely walk in the winter, typically staying in the water. They are strong and steady flyers, though, and they often fly in long strings with this unique rippling movement, with slow wing beats and occasional short glides. Even resting and sleeping in the water is pretty common, especially between feeding bouts. They in fact alternate their feeding and resting bouts about 20 to 30 minutes each during the day. And they are not aggressive basically at all. It's very rare, with physical fights typically only occurring between males during the breeding season, because when else? And males will often chase females or rival males, but it doesn't usually get to the point of actual physical aggression. They're gentle souls. It's what's wonderful about ducks. Some of them are aggressive, don't get me wrong. Don't want to give you the wrong picture. They've got a monogamous mating system, although pairs are for the season, although some do reunite yearly. And extra pair matings are rare and usually only happen when females outnumber the males. They've got a fair amount of predators. Part of the reason they usually stay on islands to stay away from them. But their predators include large gulls, ravens, crows, jaegers targeting eggs and ducklings, the Arctic fox, the red fox, polar bears, raptors, which usually prey on adults, and killer whales and harbor seals have been observed attacking molting adults. They start building their nest 1 to 2 days before the legs are laid. They start building their nest about 1 to 2 days before the eggs are laid, and females will often assess multiple sites before choosing the one that's best, or best according to them at least. and nest materials and down are collected in the midst of egg laying, and nest construction is usually finished by early incubation. They typically have only the one brood per season, and the clutch size is about 3 to 5 eggs typically, and incubation lasts 26 days. About. This is all about. There's no definite in birds. Breeding time varies by weather and their environment, and renesting can occur if the first clutch is lost, but that is limited because males leave during incubation. So if you lose the clutch and want another, but there's no male, you're kind of out of luck. And the nesting site that they choose is usually on the ground near water. But other than that, as I said, the environment can vary a lot. They don't care too much. And the females construct the nests by scraping the ground to make a little burrow, and they will start adding down once they've laid a couple eggs, which is preened from the female's belly to form insulating layers around the eggs. The eggs hatch fairly synchronously, with the first egg laid hatching first typically, and the last one hatching within about 8 hours. At hatching, they are covered in down and their eyes are open, and they leave the nest within 24 hours, so they're pretty developed. And once they do leave the nest, they do feed themselves, although they stay pretty close to the mother. They grow pretty quick too, reaching near adult mass in about 10 weeks. Fledging averages about 60 to 65 days. And larger eggs typically produce larger ducklings, and larger ducklings have the greater chance for survival. The mothers typically lead their young to the water when they need to get in the water, and they may be accompanied by ant hens, which are non-breeders or failed breeders for that season. And both mothers and ants will defend chicks and have defense posturing that they'll do for predators. And broods often will form large creches with 20 to 30 ducklings and sometimes over 150 ducklings all together, which often remains stable during the brood rearing. Everyone pitches in. They throw their young in the middle and say, yes, somebody will raise them. Creches may move together from their nesting site to mainland feeding areas, with pre-flight young known to travel over 80 kilometers from their nesting site. And it seems that lone mothers might have a higher early duckling survival rate, but multi-female groupings help improve survival as they age. As I said, the young consume softer prey than the adults typically, eating insects, amphipods, small snails, worms, and fish eggs, and they will dive within 1 hour of first water access. Smart kids. And it seems once juveniles have fledged, they may form separate flocks, and often migrate earlier but shorter distances from full adults. And the molt migration that they have may group pre-breeding males and post-breeding males together. And females usually start breeding at 2 to 3 years old, while males usually start breeding at 3 years or older. Fledgling survival rates aren't great, but adult survival is pretty high annually at 80 to 93%. And while the average adult lifespan is 7 years, they can get as old as 30 years old, with older females sometimes developing male-like plumage. And as I think I said, they are the most numerous sea duck, with their population estimates between 3.3 million and 4 million. I know that's not actually a ton of birds, but if they were all in one place, that would be a lot of birds. So if you ask people that know me what my favorite kind of bird is, they will say duck. I love ducks very much. I talk about ducks a lot. But I don't know a ton about the ducks that live on the coast, because they don't come through my region. I mainly see ducks that migrate from the Arctic through the Great Lakes to their wintering grounds. So when I was in New Hampshire with my family a couple of months ago, I was determined to get to the shore to get some sea ducks. Well, sea ducks that don't show up on Lake Ontario. Again, refer to the Bufflehead. So I ended up going to this park that's right next to the Seacoast Science Center, which is near Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It was about an hour away from where I was staying, but I had to pick up a friend at the airport, so it all worked out timing-wise. And as you might guess, given the name of this museum, it was on the coast. I didn't go into the museum, I was just in the park. And it was a rocky beach with a lot of seaweed. I spent a lot of time very carefully picking over these rocks. Seaweed is so deceptive, it is so slippery. It doesn't look like it. You're just like, that's a plant. I know how to step on a plant. No, you don't. It's a wet plant with water inside it on a rock. Be so careful if you're going to do this. I was prepared. I was prepared to fall, too. I know how to catch myself if I fall. I was prepared. So there, be warned. I didn't go specifically thinking I need a common eider, that's what I'm getting here, but I knew generally I wanted sea ducks, which a common eider wasn't a bad bet. So I started walking out towards the water. I got a couple of nice shots of this juvenile loon, not a duck. I'll go through that again if you want me to, or if you don't want me to, I probably still will. Not this second though. I also got some lovely ruddy turnstones. I got a couple of them flying too, which I love when I can get birds that are flying that don't just look like a little black arrow. I could see that there was something duck-shaped, but it was a little far away from me. So I decided to get up on this big flat rock because it didn't have seaweed on it, and even though I'd have to traverse the seaweed to get there, once I got there, I wouldn't be struggling with trying to keep my balance and holding my camera up, because I had been struggling with that. So I picked my way over there, and yep, there was a beautiful little flock of common eiders. I could tell, even from as far away as I was, that they were eiders. Again, little triangle heads. You can tell pretty easily. And I took a bunch of photos. None of them are the most spectacular photo you'll ever see, but you could see what they were, and they're pretty nice. I was excited. So now came time I had to get down off of the rock. I had been very proud of myself. I had picked over the seaweed pretty well. Not anymore. My time came. I had gotten the ducks, hit the deck. It's okay. I was prepared for this. I was fine. I didn't hurt myself at all. I just got my shoes wet because, of course, I couldn't slip onto another rock. I slipped into a little tidal pool. So I took a break from my birding to take off my drenched socks and change my shoes. Because of course I had an extra pair of shoes. Emergency knockoff Birkenstocks, always. In my backpack. I'm very proud of my own forethought. I then did keep walking around this little park for a while. There was some other marshes I wanted to go see. I did stop back at my car because, of course, besides having an emergency pair of sandals, I also had an emergency pair of boots and new socks. Forethought is my middle name. I went to another little park, not very far from there, where they had these beautiful boardwalks along the coast. And I got some nice killdeer. I got another piper or plover that I don't remember. I've got a picture. I'll figure it out. And then it started to rain, sort of bad. And if it starts raining a little bit, I just put my camera under my jacket or whatever I've got, and I'm usually okay. But if it starts raining hard enough, I'm like, okay, I gotta pack it up. I'm not destroying my camera for this. Some birds are worth it, not many. So in the end, all the eiders I saw were either females or eclipse drakes. I know you can technically tell. I'd have to figure it out, okay? I don't know. I'm not an expert at anything. While I am a duck enthusiast, I am not an ornithologist. Don't take my word on any of this. I just enjoy going out to the sea, going out to the lake, and seeing ducks. I love ducks. I love ducks. I love ducks so much. I've got a little duck. I've got a little wood duck right on my computer, sitting there always. In case you're curious, this is a green-winged teal, common merganser, wood duck, canvasback, and a mallard right there. Very important. Oh, ducks. Ducks, ducks, ducks.